Thank you, everybody. Let's see how close I can get to this thing. So my name is Sanchez. I am the mixed-use design leader for DLR Group. DLR Group is a multidisciplinary integrated design firm. We have everything from architects to interior designers, engineers, all types of engineers. We have spatial analysis, GIS analysis. We have R&D folks. So we just kind of run the whole gamut. Graphic designers as well too. We're about 1,700 people worldwide, 33 offices, 2 international, 1 in Shanghai, 1 in Dubai. My role is as a commercial mixed-use design leader, which is mostly focused around retail and housing, although any project that has like 3 or more uses kind of tends to fall into my court. So our hub is based here in Los Angeles. But we have other offices that we have key mixed-use folks in Seattle, Chicago, Dallas, Dubai, Charlotte, and a few other places as well too. But our projects are sometimes in LA, mostly not. But we have a good time kind of exploring spaces, and I'm here as yes, I studied architecture at USC, but as a design leader, especially for a firm like ours, it's really a holistic kind of approach, right? So I lead the group when it comes to, we consider all ours, every discipline, every group is a designer. Every person in our group has a design voice. So, so really it's a collective group that does all these projects. My personal passion is about connecting people to place, which is why I did Purposeful Placemaking. Placemaking is kind of like that trendy word, you know, that people are like tired of a little bit, right? But I like to put a little purpose to it. And so for me, this is my pathway to kind of lead designing for a community. So what is purposeful placemaking? Like I said, it's a little bit of a trendy word now. And some people that I work with think it's overused and overdone. To me, it's just like bread is bread. Placemaking is placemaking. It's not about being something that's trendy. It's just what it is. You know, it's an action. It's a verb, and it's a noun as well. For me, it's about discovering how the values that we inherit and the places we come from can shape the future of design. So for me, that's the important piece. You know, I want to talk about a little bit about the different components of who we are that impacts how we design for people, how we design for community as well. You hear those words over and over again. I was supposed to do this whole Mentimeter thing, have you pull out your phones, and you guys would have been like, you know, but it didn't work for me, so you guys got lucky. But I did want to ask the questions I was going to ask, just to kind of keep that in your heads. So what do you believe is the most important element in creating a great place? You know, and so in doing that, and you know, normally you'd have that word cloud here, so just kind of develop a word cloud in your own heads, is, you know, words like community, sustainability, accessibility, design, nature, those type of things. Like what's the important elements that creating a great place? The other question I had was, when you think of strong community, what words or phrases come to mind? Community has a lot of different definitions, right? It could be, this is your cohort is your community today, right? Your family community, your sports community, your art community, whatever that is, it's your community. It's the people you're with, the people you form. And sometimes that community is people, sometimes it's a place. But you know, what are the words that come to mind? For me, it's a lot of times it's belonging, you know, interaction, sociability. Those are the type of things that I think about when it's about community. So the first value I wanted to talk about was the values we inherit. So this is San Sebastián del Oeste in Jalisco. This is where my parents are from. It's a small town, about an hour away from Puerto Vallarta. It takes about an hour in a car ride. I haven't been there since probably high school or something like that, so it's not like a recent picture or anything, but from me. But this is a place that I heard a lot of stories from. You know, and I have visited, I do remember, have good memories about it. But it's a place where I was born into the stories, the folklore of a place like this. And when you have an origin story like this, of a unique little place that, you know, it's famous now because it's like the town that stood still. If you look at it, it's beautiful, cobblestone streets, the little gazebo at the plaza, the church that rings across the whole town. From one end to the other, you can hear the church bells, right? But also the stories that my parents would tell. You know, they met here at the square, or at least that's the story that they tell. all the tias and tios would sit around the benches you see on the outside, and they would watch as, you know, the kids or the young adults or whatever would kind of hang out and walk around the plaza, and then there'd always be like a dance or party. The stores would open up and you'd smell the food, you smell all the handcrafted goods that would be sold there. And this is what their place felt like. This was their community. And for me, it was those kind of romantic kind of stories of that, you know, of that kind of place. There's values that we learn. I'm from Long Beach, California, so I'm glad to be back in my hometown. I don't live that far away from here, but it's nice to be back here anyway. So Long Beach for me is where my story began. And it began as an immigrant story. My dad came to the US too, just like most people that come here to build a better life. He started working as a dishwasher at a restaurant in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue. It was a coffee shop. He worked his way up, became a line cook, became the head cook in this kind of place. And he ended up buying the restaurant about 7 years after he arrived here to the US. That was his story. From that, it was a lot about hard work. You know, the things that I learned, and I learned from him. But it also was a lot about this kind of idea of duality for me. You know, there's the beach. I lived in East Long Beach, so it kind of like hugged both kind of worlds. So a little bit about the beach, Naples, 2nd Street, Shrine Village, all that. And there was the other side too that was completely different than that. But it was also rich in culture, right? I grew up in the 90s, and just aged myself right now. There was Snoop Dogg, Warren G, The Dog Pound, and Sublime. So that was like my culture. There was a lot of artwork. We played a lot of basketball in big asphalt places like this where there's no trees, no shade, where everything else on the other side felt very lush and green and pedestrian friendly. So those are the kind of things the values that I learned in the time that I was there. Growing up, the things you kind of absorb, the things that you learn in that kind of period of time. Then there are the values that we earn. And for me, it was moving away. And I didn't move away too far. I went to USC. So it was up the freeway. But for me, it was a completely different world. It was under right south of the skyscrapers, technically South Central LA, but whatever. You know, it's downtown LA. And from there is going to school, learning from the people that were there, in a private institution where I had just gone to public schools my whole life. Studying architecture from, you know, great professors and being exposed to a lot of things. I had to do my study abroad program in France. So that for me, as a kid from Long Beach, I was like, what? Like, what am I doing here? You know? And from there, like the work experiences as well. I've gotten to travel for work as well, to places all over the world. And I've been lucky to design projects in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, Southeast Asia. And so that's kind of like the things that I earned. I earned that work. I earned that ability to explore those places and see the world in that kind of way. And then the stuff that you get to do for fun, for pleasure. And that comes from traveling as well too. You get to see other cultures, other experiences. These are mostly European images, but gave me a sense of placemaking in a different kind of way that I saw it here. A lot of times they were from like movies or books or stories I would see. But in this case, seeing it live, you know, the canals in Amsterdam or in Italy, as well as the artists working in Montmartre, in Paris, in London, the colorful kind of streets and the old yards. Those are the things that kind of stood in my mind. You know, things were different, things were the same. There's people interacting, people gathering, but every place has its own kind of flavor and culture. So added on to what I inherited and the culture there, to the things that I learned, and then the things that I say I earned. You know, I made those things happen for myself as, you know, an adult. There was a moment there that was like AIA was doing this whole, AIA is it's the Association of Institute of Architecture, like that. I should probably know that. But they had this whole marketing campaign about I look up. And it was like a hashtag I look up, and you're supposed to like tag it on your Instagram accounts. And this whole thing of kind of like making people aware of architecture. And when we think of architecture, we're very focused on buildings. And I'm probably like not a good architect by saying don't focus on the buildings, but I'm gonna say a little bit about not focusing on the buildings. They wanted you to look up because they wanted to see the shelter. That's the whole purpose of building, right? To provide shelter. And I just took a trip about a couple months ago, right before the Olympics, to Paris and London. And I did what every good designer would do. I looked up and I saw buildings and I saw the things that covered yourself and provided shelter. And It's amazing, right? You're in Versailles, you see these painted ceilings underneath the Eiffel Tower, just like being impressed by the scale and the structure and the architecture of that. St. Paul's Cathedral, just the expansiveness of that dome, and the stained glass windows at Saint Chapelle. Those things are impressive. You know, we care about those things. And sometimes we actually look at the ground too, and we'll see what kind of, oh, this is concrete, or this is terrazzo, this is stone. Most people don't give a shit, right? Most people are looking at what's around them and what's in the details of the space. They're looking at the things that are within their eyesight. And usually it's not up and down, it's straight ahead. So when I did this trip, and this was my daughter's like senior trip that we took together, you know, it's like the ornate water fountains in Paris that some of them actually have sparkling water, which is, I thought was insane, but they're all over the city, and they're markers as you go along the city. The locks of love at Sacre, where you know, read the inscriptions on the locks as well. The cafes all have the seats facing out to the street, you know, which is always interesting because the public space is a theater, right? And you're there exploring and seeing the movement of people across that city, and it's a beautiful sight to see. There's always movement there. The artists, again, like I said at Montmartre, I'm always inspired by the work that they're doing. Each one of them has a completely different style. Seeing them work through that as well too. And the parks are always activated, and the artwork they see on the walls. Every kind of space it's unique. Just like the ceilings are unique, just like the flooring is unique. But again, who cares about those spaces? Who understands those unique kind of moments? What memories are getting grabbed from that? And for me, the key thing about placemaking, number one thing, is the memories you're going to develop. You know, that smile that you get, that kind of feeling good about yourself because you're in this cool space, or you see a cool artifact. Those are the things that really defined placemaking. I'm going to do a series of examples of my work, you know, and collaborative work. You know, it's not myself, there's always a team, right? These are built case studies. This is where we try to realize purposeful placemaking. But I would say too, as we go along these, there's also lessons learned from each of these projects. It's not, yes, it got built, and then what happened after that. It's a study of what happens, how people use that space, and how it works or doesn't work. This is the collection at River Park. It's located in Oxnard, California, right along the 101 freeway. There's a big sign that says the collection on it. And it's basically an outdoor mall. But it's developed around an urban framework, so it has a lot of streets, and you can see the scale of it. It's big. There's a lot of buildings there. There's housing towards the back. You have restaurants. You have a Target. You have H&M. All the good stuff you want to see in a mall, food hall. But how people navigate is important and key. And here, the key part of that navigation, that placemaking component we wanted to draw people in, was art. And so we purposely, with the client and an art director, worked to get artists into the site, and how we integrated that was going to be key. So we worked with a lot of, probably 8, 10 different artists around Southern California, and they all did different type of elements. Some were sculptural fountains, some were mosaic tiles, you know, just big open spaces for concerts. So music is an art form too, providing that space for that to happen. And there are art shows that happen at this place. The Frank Romero, which is a really famous Mexican-American muralist, has 4 different pieces here. And people will drive up or on the way to Santa Barbara stop by to see his work. Frank Bauer as well, who did a bunch of, and I saw him do this because it was like a weird time where it was like a recession. So it was just him and a few other people working. So I would go up to check it on the site, and he's there placing each of these handmade pieces of fish tiles that would create that large mosaic that's on the lower right here. And so seeing that happen in fruition, and also seeing how it's interacted with, has been a key kind of piece. It's how art itself can be a key component, not the elements necessarily that you can touch, or you can touch this stuff too, but it's really like the artist component, culture of art into the space as well. This is Monet Avenue in Victoria Gardens, and this is about reimagining place. What's interesting about this project, similar size to the collection, if you look at the overall aerial view, it's a lot of streets and the same kind of urban framework. But this is the one project that makes me feel really, really old. Because when I first worked at this for Mountain Partners at the time, I first worked on the project that did the first initial master plan, and the project got built, and I joined the firm right as the project was getting done. Then I get to redesign a street 10 years later. So I'm like, now I'm working on my own projects that we already did, that already got too old and needs to get redone again. So that's when you really you've been in the business a while. It's when you get to work on your projects again. In this case, the overall master plan was developed with the idea that it was a city built over time. And it was developing a downtown in Rancho Cucamonga, which didn't have one at the time. They had just built a new city hall and a new library, and it needed a downtown. And again, this is an outdoor lifestyle center, mall. And it was designed and built around that with a very, the infrastructure was really established. Everything that you see normally in the street, right? Curbs, fire hydrants, manholes, it's a downtown. Right? And everything was meant to kind of see that. But this street here was struggling at a JCPenney, which is probably one of the reasons why, and a couple of mattress shops. The leasing was suffering. So we decided to come back and reinvent this street. And transformation becomes key because when you relook at things in a new framework, like I said before, when you have a built project and go back and you revisit it, and you look at it with a new frame of mind, and you start thinking about well, what works and what doesn't work. What didn't work before was that we had these big Washingtonian trees and these hedge planters that along the sidewalk that sometimes you see, that took up a lot of water. So it wasn't the most sustainable practice. And maybe that was okay at that period of time because people were like, this is what people want to see in these type of streets. So what we did here was make sure that it was drought tolerant planting, which also meant that it was more Southern California, more rancho, than it was what we were trying to establish before, which was more European, And so now it felt more connected, and it felt more like SoCal. Also, a lot of seating. Before it was always like a bench, kind of like those benches we saw in San Sebastian in the square down along the sides. They were kind of those more traditional benches along the street. But here we're like, no, this is going to be different. We're going to create spaces that people can interact and talk to each other. And we use wood in a natural form to do that as well. And then for me, key component is when we do a fountain, as much as I love Bellagio on the show or the Grove and the music and the dancing fountains, to me, water and those type of elements should be tactile, And so I love this fountain because you always see kids playing in it, kids getting wet and just kind of running their hands through it, and it feels like real, it feels tangible. And so I think that's a key component as well. And then the image at the upper left. We put charging stations because you do that now. Every airport has them. Every place that you go to has them. What the cool discovery was that every day around 3 o'clock, all the high school kids that are coming through the center, that's where they hang out. They charge their phones before they either go get Shake Shack or go home or whatever they're doing. And they just hang out and talk there. And so this picture was a moment in time, but that moment in time happens a lot. And it's cool to be able to have that kind of space that was purpose of function, charge your phone. But what ended up happening was it became a social space for these kids to kind of hang out in. This project is in Las Vegas, downtown Summerlin, near the Red Rocks and the Red Rock Casino. This is bigger than the other ones. Same type of idea. It has a large office building, has a lot of restaurants, a lot of retail spaces, a lot of parking. All these projects have a lot of parking. At times I joke about, I'm probably more of a parking designer than I'm anything else because parking is always king in these places. But the same kind of problem, like how do you get people to discover and explore spaces? And it's about creating comfortable scale. You see the picture with a person walking along. This is Vegas, it's hot. You need this to be activated at all times. You have to provide shade or then it doesn't work. People are not gonna go someplace that you can't feel comfortable and protected. And so for us, this is about lingering in design. And lingering is actually more than just like enjoying yourself, hanging out. It means dollar signs. When you're at a retail center, a developer, a client, they want people to hang out as long as possible because the longer they hang out, the more money they spend. Right? So there's a function of placemaking that's about feeling good about yourself, creating cool spaces for people, bringing community together. And there's the other part of it that there's an ROI, a return on investment. The return on investment is important to our clients. right? So when we create spaces for a place like Vegas, there's this piece right here that has like restaurants around it, a little bit of an oasis, has a little lake around it, a little bridge going across. Materials that are very, again, central to the area, drought-tolerant landscaping, Corten steel, just very kind of desert-like kind of materiality. It feels comfortable. People like to be here. And my first hint to that was like, I was on their Instagram account because I always follow the accounts of whatever project that I've done. And there are people taking like quinceañera pictures there, or their homecoming pictures here. You know, this becomes their place that they go to, where they're creating their own core memories as well. The fountain, again, very artistic, very sculptural. So when you're designing an element like this, with metals or whatever it is, whether it's a form of art or it's a form of function like a fountain, again, how are people going to interact with it? How are people going to touch it? Here we had to be careful because the little holes in it, make sure a kid's finger couldn't fit in there and cut themselves and we get sued. But you know, there's ways of kind of like working through artwork that's functional, that looks good, that people use, that people want to gather and be around. And in this case too, just tensile structures that just provided comfort and shade. Again, Vegas, hot. So it should work at all times. So that's the built stuff. You know, like I said, a lot of learned things that happen there. A small snippet, although the truth is that we design and envision a lot more than actually gets built. And things that, to get things built, especially the scale that you saw, takes about 4 to 8 years. So I've been at Dealer Group for 8 years now. I was at the previous firm that you saw most of those projects for 12 years. It took that period of time to get those projects built, from conception to realization. And so in that time, things change. There are trends that change, society changes, technology changes. So you have to always keep up with that. And so we're always shaping the future. So it's not so much that you're designing for today. When you first put pen to paper, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm gonna draw something that's gonna get built in like 5 minutes. And maybe if you're an industrial designer or something else, that might be the case. You might be able to 3D print that thing and it's gonna be coming out and somebody's gonna be able to use it. But when you design at scale, and for people like this, you're always kind of envisioning the future and looking ahead. Because that thing's not gonna get built for another 4 or 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And so you're trying to always go and guess what's coming next. So this project is in Oak Ridge Mall. It's up in San Jose. And I don't know if you've heard of the term TOD, which is typically attached to transit-oriented development. This is what we started developing as a trail-oriented development. And it came from the fact that in San Jose, I didn't know this until we did a lot of GIS research and all that kind of stuff we do before a project. But there's the largest network of trail systems in the US. There's 2 large ridges, and it just happens to have a lot of trails, bike trails, and everything else. So like, how can we bring that to this project at this mall? And this is an interior mall that we were developing the parking lot outside of that. And so we wanted to bring that kind of same idea. But in order to have trails, like when you're up in the ridge and the trail, the one thing that's king is nature and people. No cars. So how do we do a project like this that takes away the cars? And we showed the other projects that it was all about the car. You know, how to get there, how to park safely into the zone. So we developed, first of all, the system that kind of connected the trails. And we started with the main trail walker, the mall walker. So there's always the idea, and you guys might not know this, but for a while there, the indoor enclosed malls was like, if you ever show up there at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's a bunch of like, usually elderly people that are walking the mall, and the mall walkers that take the steps. So we said like, well, that's our first trail. How do we then incorporate that trail into our project? And then we started expanding out, bringing in the trails from the ridges, the community trails that are around the system that was developed around the San Jose. And this is working with the city, looking at zoning, looking at plans that they had for bike trails, for walking trails around there. We looked at Stava and Nike run plans and see where like the connection points would be. So there was a hot spot that was a couple miles away. Okay, how can we get the hot spot connected to our project as well too? So there's a lot of research and development that happens in order to kind of make these things be connective and bring community into the project. So this is the parking lot. at the project. And yeah, it looks like those basketball courts I grew up in Long Beach. Just asphalt, a few trees, maybe it has some leaves on it. And the key is, like, again, is what's the imagination of this place? What's the potential of it? In this case, it's, you know, literally mixed-use development, retail, housing, office, in a space, and again, with the idea of making it where the pedestrian, the people is king. People first at all times. Here again, we're using the materiality that makes sense for this area, using landscaping to really make it feel lush and open and welcoming. The sidewalks filled with outdoor seating so people can engage and allow the public space to be theater again. One of the best things to do is just people watch, right? And so allowing for indoor-outdoor connections and activities becomes a key component. Balconies that provide a semi-private, kind of look, semi-public look into the space as well. And having eyes on the street, you know. The idea here was to take, most of the outside of the building was mostly white, kind of standard, but what we did is we carved out a trail and we took the earth out. So everything inside of this space was meant to feel organic. The finishes of the buildings were wood. We overgrew landscaping, planting to just kind of make the space feel lush and give it the idea of a true trail along this space. Again, parking lot. You know, this was part of the entrance into the mall itself. And here we bring in two other worlds, residential with retail, in this case more service-oriented retail with a fitness lab, and as well as other pieces that are used by the residents here at the site. But again, kind of just reimagining what was there before into something new. And the way that we did, we went all in on the whole trail thing. We named everything after trails, the trailhead, the meadow, the cove, the crest. So we kind of took that on and kind of just even added that in the graphics and design of the project too. So really kind of doubled down in what this culture of San Jose is, which is hiking and trails and walking through, becoming pedestrians around your environment. And we created almost like a hill in the site, and that's where the parking went. So yes, there's still parking here because you got to get people here. Not as much parking as was needed before because we have a light rail that's right outside the project, so we can use the transit connections there. There's a bus depot that's nearby as well. So we also studied, you know, what is the actual need of cars here? So we minimized that amount, and then the rest of them we tucked under. You know, we couldn't afford to go underground, so we lifted it above, and we created that pedestrian trail over that mound. So the theme, the idea, the concept follows through all the way through the project. And all of this is really about like a 24-hour activation when you work on a true mixed-use project. When you have people that work here, that live here, that visit, that shop, that play. It's really about creating this continuous activation around the space. Really about the day to night transitions as well. So it's always activated, there's always something going on. And really kind of providing diverse activities too. You know, it brings energy to the space. You know, granted everybody's asleep at night, you know, hopefully, right? But like, there's activation of the space as well too. There's eyes in the space, there's protection, there's security to having people on site, even if they're sleeping. But there's also, when they're gone and they're off to their jobs, there's people here that are shopping, they're using the space as well too. There's farmers markets, there's other components that just bring energy to the site. And that's a key sustainability point too, is that we didn't build the housing project here, and then an office building somewhere else, and another retail mall somewhere else. It's all together in one space, allowing more space to open up for other things. The walk is located in Norwalk. We're under, right now we're about to start construction documents on this project. This one's a special project for me because it's working with a really cool developer, Prime Store Development. And one of the key things about them, they're Latino owned, work almost exclusively in Latino-centric communities, mostly in under-resourced communities too. And what they do is they start design from the community first. They don't ask us what we think. We ask the community first. There's a ton of get-to-know-you sessions, town halls. I've had a ton of breakfast burritos with a bunch of people just kind of asking, like, what do you want to see in this space? And sometimes we can deliver on everything they ask, and sometimes we can't. And when we can't, we kind of work through those ideas and thoughts of like, okay, if you wanted this, is this an alternative to that? Or trying to understand exactly what they meant by that. And most of the time they just don't want traffic and other kind of items that people complain about. And the site is also unique because it's currently Norwalk's civic center. City Hall's here, the federal courthouse is here as well. And so what we're using is developing the land to create a mixed-use development. Again, it's civic, retail, and housing in one space. So a true mixed-use project. But the key thing that we care about here is when we ask about community-centric design, what are they going to care about the most? Do they care if that's going to be a Trader Joe's? Yeah, probably. Or a restaurant, or whatever it is that there's a wish list for community members. But they mostly always want, like, what about the space that we can gather and hang out? What about the green space that was here before? What are you going to do with that? Is the housing going to be affordable or not? The housing here is mostly affordable housing. There's some market rate. But in order for it to be affordable housing, we had to go to modular housing. So it's all prefabricated in the space. The retail is very, very flexible. Just because retail changes a lot too, but we wanted to make sure that we were going to build ahead and make the spaces as flexible as possible. There's been some evolutions to the design, so there's a little bit of an older rendering, but again, it gives you a sense of the materiality, the scale of the project as well, the incorporation of artwork into the site as well too. This is along Imperial Highway in Norwalk. A complete transformation from what was before. And again, key component is to create a public space that people want to be. And the scale has to fit right. So you have the housing and the retail kiosks in the space. We want to really kind of create a garden effect, create this kind of SoCal casual style that we like to term, where you have canopies where the sun's hitting it, no canopies where the sun's not hitting it, outdoor dining where you can do it, indoor, outdoor as much as possible, and just being an engager to the space and develop different rooms. So not just like SoCal, nothing's all the same. In the landscaping plan, working with Agency Artifact and Chris Torres, creating different rooms and different spaces and different activation zones here as well. Then sometimes you find these moments, and this might be just a pass-through between two buildings, a paseo, and how can you be inspired to create something that's engaging, get people to want to go from one side to the other. The easy one is murals. You have a concrete block wall, you get a local artist to paint a cool mural. In this case, we use a tensile structure to create some shade in the space as well too. Gets hot here too. I was inspired here by papel picado, which you see in Mexican parties, the kind of cut through. If you look through, you kind of see through the space and the banners, you kind of see that the holes in that kind of fabric too as well too. So kind of create a cultural connection to majority of the demographic in this area, but at the same time, not a literal representation of that, just like what is an abstract version of that maybe I'm the one that gets it and nobody else is gonna get it, but now you guys know too. And when we're doing these spaces and kind of creating what works and doesn't work, one of the key pieces to that is kind of understanding how we can measure an open space and public space. A lot of times all we need is something protected, away from the cars, or something secluded or private or semi-private. When we want a public space too, we want to go from protection as key, important, safety. But as we move through that, it's about delight. What brings us delight? What makes us happy? What makes us want to come back? What makes us want to spend time here? And usually it's about discovery. It's usually about creating community. What's the history, culture of the space? Have we connected to that as well? Those are the things you're going to remember. You're not going to remember like, oh, there was like a couple buildings and I felt safe from the street. No, you're going to remember that was like this cool art piece. I found they had a hopscotch things chalked out on the ground, and you got to relive a childhood game. Whatever that piece was, it's the thing that you're going to remember. Or maybe it was just a conversation you had with your significant other or a friend, that you had in that space, and you remember that being allowed to happen in that space. This other project with Prime Store is the biggest project that they've done in their company. It's something that we're really excited about. It's a long time in the coming because these type of Catalyst projects take a long time. We're going through a specific plan review right now, and we're hoping to get started on the drawings very, very soon. This is a true TOD, like I talked about before, a transit-oriented development. There's a new rail that's going to land right in front of the project that's getting built for the 2028 Olympics. And I say Catalyst because Panorama is like smack in the middle of the valley. And predominantly Latino. I think it's probably something like 60%, 70% around in the demographics in this area. If you wanted to go anywhere to kind of go to these shopping centers that like have a Nike store or Apple store or whatever, you gotta go to Topanga, Americana, the Grove. This is making that happen here. But it's still kind of connected to the people that live here. And so for us, crafting that heart of the community, what does that mean? It's about reinvention of the space. Sometimes it's getting Apple to understand the potential of the people that are here. And that's what Prime Store does really, really well. They look at the Apple stores and the restaurants that sometimes don't come to these communities, and they let them know, no, this is why, these are the way this community shops, is the way this community buys, how they spend their free time, how they spend their free money, and why they deserve to have X tenant here or X space here. They're good at bringing other components that work together. It might be a podcast center or a museum that works with other retailers and again attracts that kind of piece. Reinventing the idea and the thought of what the space is. Here we're looking at connecting. It's a time, a place, especially as we were designing this. 2020 kind of rolled around right in the middle of it, and we're thinking about. So if people aren't going to shop because they're online shopping, right? How do we get them here? How do we get them to stay? And so really, it's about the things that you can't get from online shopping, right? It's the experience of eating out and seeing food as theater. The idea of seeing people come together, community concerts or events. And so the programming becomes a key space, and creating those public spaces that we talked about and how you measure those becomes a key space to this. Understanding this community is understanding family. It's multi-generational. So if you're designing something for the teenager, the Gen Zer, or the Gen Alpha, and you're forgetting about the boomer, ain't gonna work, because grandma lives with everybody else, right? So you have to create spaces that are multi-generational, that work for everybody. And then also an experience. This isn't, sometimes you go to a place because you just go and figure it out once you get there. And we wanted this place to be that as well. So the rail is going to come in, it's going to be transformational, it's going to have a lot of affordable housing that's required by LA, but this client wants to do that too. It'll have market rate housing, it'll have a lot of retail, a lot of restaurants. Again, we'll find some unique kind of differentiated uses as well too, for the space too, to make it unique and different from others. And creating those plazas and engagement as well too. So really excited about the future and where this is going to go in the next few years. This last project I'm going to show, I labeled under big vision and global impact. So the big box in the middle that you see there is Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. Mall of America is like the largest mall in the North America. I've been there where there's 20 buses lined up of tourists that are just going to shop there. It was known in the past for having Camp Snoopy in the middle, big amusement park in the middle of the mall. It's Nickelodeon World now. It probably has 5 gaps inside of it because it's so big. You fill it up with 5 gaps, I guess, and other kind of stores. And so we've been working on Mall of America for the last 25 years. The company has. And it was a mall before. They've added an office building, a hotel. We're working on a big giant water park that's going to be connected to it as well too. There's going to be this whole amateur sports thing that's going to happen around there as well too. The city of Bloomington and Minneapolis wanted to bring the World Expo to Minneapolis. So we competed against Serbia, Argentina, Thailand, missing one, Spain, for the project. Unfortunately, we came up short. I'm still disappointed about that. It's a little bitter about that, but it went to Serbia. But it was a fun experience, a great design task to have, to do something of scale, just do something of impact. And in this case, post George Floyd and what had happened there in Minneapolis, the city wanted to show how it had been healing. And so it was really about healthy people, healthy planet, and wellness for all. That was like the theme for the project itself. And so we wanted to have that essence of healing into this project as well. And so doing that is really about connecting back to nature as well. You know, this is a big giant scale. The airport's right north of us. And we had 2 different sites. The one on the north, right of the mall, and then there's another, that's more like the expo piece of it, and to the north was more the cultural conference spaces and performance spaces. We were inspired by the Minnesota. If you don't know, it's the land of 1,000 lakes. And so we were inspired by the lake archetype. And we used water and fluidity as kind of like the idea of how we wanted people to move around the space. And inform the architecture as well. But really it's about the movement. The buildings allowed for the movement to happen in the spaces as well. We were really inspired about universal design, you know, if it's gonna be for all, it's gonna be for all. And for all meant as well as flora and fauna, and we had animal crossings and all these other kind of things that we were looking at developing. We shared about how we were going to make this a haven for the monarch butterfly. This is one of the landing spots in North America for them. So all these kind of components become holistically in one theme again, sticking and double down on that theme. When you have an expo, it's like the Space Needle and the Eiffel Tower, all part of the expo. Unfortunately, we had a height limit. So it's because of the airport right there, so we couldn't go as high as the Space Needle, the Eiffel Tower, but this was a reversed fountain that was kind of like the World of Color at Disney, where you have like the whole show on the water itself. So we wanted to create an iconic element that would live here, that would be that lasting image for the project. And each host nation gets to have their own expo pavilion. And for us, our imagination of it was something that, again, doubling down, sustainability, a mass timber pavilion that was completely ramped, so it was all accessible to everybody as well. And so celebrating sustainability, celebrating access, celebrating inclusivity at all times. And within that, again, connecting at different levels and just having a connected, we have a smaller site than most of the other countries that we're playing with, and so we wanted everything to feel connected as much as possible. And even when we had to connect, that was the biggest challenge, connecting the 2 sites to each other, and we had a little monorail that connected the 2. Even the bridge was a placemaking opportunity. You can ride your bike there, you can walk across, but there was moments to just linger and stop and enjoy a picnic or whatnot. And this was meant to kind of obviously live and have a legacy beyond that, and actually we're still looking at that. The people that we're working with are looking at this design, looking at the things that we've done, and seeing what else is the next step for us, because they want to continue with this process. Down to like the performance zone and area, the conference center, as well, a celebration of culture and space and music, all happening in the space. So, you know, looking forward to whatever this reinvention is going to be. So what's next? What's the future of placemaking? We talked a little bit about sustainability. That's important. Most of the time, sustainability is the stuff you kind of like see, like you think of that, like solar panels, wind turbines, bioswales. That stuff is like whatever, right? It's like the stuff you see, the given. But it's really about our environmental responsibility. Comes to all of the things that we've mostly talked about. It's responsible to have community engagement. Understand what people want. Because if they don't want what's there, they don't use it, it's a waste. And wasteful is not sustainability, right? Biodiversity, of landscaping, walkability, you know, make sure we get the cars out, the emissions down. A green infrastructure is important. When we're building something, we're building for the future. So we're building with sustainability in mind, whether it's stormwater capture or energy capture. If we're charging batteries for cars, we're also charging the buildings that are there too. So you think about those things at the same time. Resource efficiency too, like where are we sourcing the materials from? You know, are they local? Because of that, materials coming from China or from the Middle East that's using fossil fuels to get here. So where can we get this that's local and we can minimize those uses as well? Having cultural sustainability too. And I talked about that at the very beginning, right? It's the pieces that we inherit is key. Because if the place has a connectiveness to the people that are there, again, it's going to be used, it feels authentic, it's connected. Resilience is key. You know, we went through a pandemic where the interior mall, guess what happened? They closed the doors. Nobody can use it. But when I went to Victoria Gardens in the middle of like the shutdown, there are people walking with the strollers with the kids. It's an open air mall. It's their streets, it's their downtown. And maybe not every retailer was open, but they still used the space. That mall, it was closed. Nobody was using that space. Equity inclusion obviously is the key and important, understanding who the people are and how it's being used and being accessible to all. And again, wellness is a key component. Bringing wellness into projects is a connective piece that is sustainable to our own selves, the people, right? And so that's sustainability as well. That's environmental awareness and responsibility. So the future of placemaking, I was just thinking about what does that mean? And usually when we're trying to envision things, I go to Midjourney and type in a few prompts and say like, what's this mood board I'm gonna create or this kind of project that I'm gonna do, and just get a few ideas from there. And it's kind of a use that we do in the project, and when I typed a bunch of words, this is what came out. This is, I guess, the future placemaking, right? But the reality to that, the only word that I used that was different than any language that I've used before is futuristic, right? All these other words that I've been using is in every project I've ever designed, you know, because it's sustainable, it's forward thinking, it's about placemaking, it's about people, right? So granted, yes, we can have skyways and different things over lush of landscaping and placemaking, but yes, so the key to the future is what we're doing today, visioning for the, looking forward, understanding what placemaking truly is. And when doing that, there are plenty of resources. Project for Public Spaces is a great resource. They're like Jeff Ken is one of the key people for when it comes to placemaking around the world. Talks about activation, sociability, access, comfort, and it tells you all the words that you need to know about how to create a great place. But before we leave today, I wanted to kind of have a call to action. I wanted to write it down and read it out, because I think for me it's important. And I hope that's like the lasting thing that you get from this talk, is that I want us to commit to designing for those who need it the most. And to be thoughtful and innovative in placemaking, that can be a catalyst to a community, transformational. It can be empowering to communities. It can create opportunities. It can foster resilience. And I think all of us, as designers in general, whatever it is, whether it's small scale or big scale, I think we can shape our environments that we're in, and we can uplift and inspire based off of that design. That's literally our number one job, to inspire and uplift. I want to have every voice heard, so that means that we're connecting to the community, we're hearing and we're listening to what they're saying, and we meet every one of their needs. So I want to kind of just make a lasting impact, to the work that we do. And I think that's important. And for me, like my favorite images of the projects that I've worked on are these. It's the one that has a Yoga Tuesday. It's the one that their kids are charging their iPhones on. It's having the kids get wet at a Pop Jet fountain, the parents having to go buy clothes at the kids store next door, because you always put the kids store next to the Pop Jet because the kids are going to get wet, you have to change them. So that's always smart leasing there. Making things tactile, able to join. I love a good music festival, having spaces where you can gather as many people as possible in one space and enjoy a common thing. And I like that other image with the fireworks, because I just think it's cool that a space that I designed can be there for any kind of celebration, big or small. That small conversation where you make that strong connection with somebody else, or somewhere where the community comes together and you explode in fireworks as well too. And this last slide, this is the one that's going to piss off my kids. 17 and 14 now. I would never be able to do this photo shoot with them now. But this is at the collection in River Park, and then just them enjoying the artwork that was around them. And so this is why I do what I do. These are the people that need it the most. It's obviously like my kids, but also everybody else that's around it, and just having fun and enjoying our time together. So thank you very much. And thank you.